Hello! I'm using this recording really just to give a brief overview of my lesson and point out some particular aspects and technology related links, as well as building in my reflection about my lesson. You may also go through and read my lesson and my reflection, but this is another way for me to present this information to you today. My lesson focuses on English language arts, 3rd grade level, and it's really looking at telling the difference between fantasy and reality. The standards that I'm focusing on, as you can see, is looking at answering and asking questions to demonstrate understanding of text and referring explicitly to the text as a basis for the answers. Also explaining how specific aspects of the text illustrate and contribute to what is conveyed by the words in a story. In other words, the students are going to be able to answer whether the text pieces are reality or fantasy by looking at the illustrations and using the words in the story to help them decide. When looking at the goals, first the unit goal. The overall unit goal is to look at investigations. It's looking at the world around us, whether it be the space, animals, future, and ourselves. For the lesson, it narrows it and it looks at the idea of wolves. We're finding more information and investigating about wolves, and we're realizing the difference between reality and fantasy. When creating my lesson goal, I created a SMART goal, which means it's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. I said at the end of this lesson, when given a 3rd grade level text, the students will identify 3 things that are reality and 3 things that are fantasy from within the text using words and/or pictures with 80% accuracy. This goal relates to the content standards and the overall unit goal. It looks at having the students answer the questions, whether it's reality or fantasy, and students have to use the text illustrations and the words in the story to help them decide. Also, it investigates more information, like I said earlier, about wolves, as well as their understanding of reality and fantasy. The next thing I would like to look at is some methods. If you look at the methods, I always begin by sharing the lesson goal. This is important because the students then are able to be aware of the main objective for the lesson. It can help them plan ahead, think about the assessments coming up, and they know the expectation of what I'm wanting them to learn. I try to put the lesson's goal into kid-friendly terms, and you've probably heard of this I can't statements. For this particular lesson, I said I can identify things that are reality and things that are fantasy in a story using words and/or pictures. The students will use the pictures and words in the stories to help them decide. This makes it clear the students are having to look for words that help tell them whether it's reality or fantasy, and they're also going to be looking at the illustration. The next thing that I do at the beginning is to build upon their prior knowledge. It's important to activate this to keep them engaged and to let them be able to relate and connect with the topic you're studying. So I begin by doing a KWL chart on the SMART board. This way, it's going to be visually and auditorily stimulating to the students. It feeds to different learning styles and different preferences, and also can help keep them engaged. And with the KWL chart, at the beginning, you're going to fill out what the students know and then what they want to learn. The next step is to model the information. First, I'm going to describe the vocabulary and using words that the students will understand, and then we're going to go through information together. When we're going through information together, we're going to do a slideshow. You can, no matter whether you have access to the Treasures material like I do with my school or not, you can access these websites that I share and use the materials that they have provided. It is free to anyone and everyone, students, parents, teachers alike. All you have to do is right-click and go to open the hyperlink. If that doesn't work, you can also copy and paste these websites into your browser. Next, just click on Open Hyperlink. You should come to this website. You're going to go down to Unit 2 and then click on Wolf. When you click on this, it should open up to different activities. You are going to go to the oral language activities. Next, you will click on the slideshow. After clicking on the slideshow, this screen should come up. This screen is interactive and would be great to use on your smartboard. If not, you can always have the students gather around a computer as you go through, or have them individually manipulated if you have a computer lab. This slideshow really just goes through to explain and bring more knowledge about wolves and their habits. And it does all the talking for you. Here's an example.
Wolves live and hunt in groups called packs. There can be up to 20 wolves in a pack. They look for food, sleep, eat, and raise wolf pups together. Wolves live together in specific areas called territories. The wolf pack defends its territory against other wolves that do not belong to the pack. Why do you think wolves live in packs? Now talk to your partner.
As you could see, it told some things that were reality-based about wolves, so that the students can increase their base knowledge about wolves and what's true about them. Also, the Talk About It section really supports the idea of your students collaborating. As I did in my lesson, I used the Talk About It time for students to discuss what they're learning with their shoulder partners, the students that are sitting next to them. After you are done with the slideshow, you're going to do some practice activities with the students. Again, you're going to click on this hyperlink. It'll take you to the same previous page we did before. You can do it by either right-clicking and going to open hyperlink or copying and pasting it into your browser. Again, you click on Wolf, and then you're going to go to the language activities, activity 1 and 2. You're going to do these with your students. I'm going to take you to activity 2.
Find the correct picture and grab it with the tool. Wolves are carnivores or meat eaters and very skilled hunters. Look at the pictures on the screen and use your mouse to lead the wolf to the things it might eat.
As you can see, this program really does the explaining of the directions for you. So the students are going to listen, and as a group, you guys are going to decide, what do wolves really eat? The great thing about it, as you're doing it with the students, if the wrong answer is chosen,
flower.
It even says what your choice will be, and it autocorrects.
Yikes!
Ooh, yikes, not it.
Tropical fish. Yikes!
Not it again.
Deer.
And it gives a signal that they have it correct. The great thing about this game is that it's visually and auditorily stimulating. It really helps keep your students involved and able to be engaged throughout your activities and throughout your lesson. Plus, it's a fun, easy way to show students some reality pieces about a wolf. After the slideshow and activities are done, you're going to fill out the Learn section of the KWL chart. This will reflect what the students have learned about wolves and what they now know is really true about wolves, giving them that reality piece of what wolves really like to do and how they live. After that, the next method step is providing guided practice. This is important because students need repetition. They need to hear things over and over and over again. Plus, this provides that scaffolding support so that all your students can be successful no matter their level. How I'm going to do guided practice is that we're going to use dry erase boards and markers. This is kind of low tech. Most people have access to dry erase boards and markers. You can also make your own just by laminating a sheet of white paper. On one side, the students will write an R. On the other side, they're going to write an F. Students are going to listen to the story Little Red Riding Hood, which most of them probably will be familiar with. As going through and listening to the story, I'm going to stop periodically, and the students are going to listen to some statements, and they're going to hold their boards up to tell me whether that statement is reality or whether that statement is fantasy. I'm going to show you how to get access to this Little Red Riding Hood. Again, I'm accessing the internet and using the smartboard in order to present this information. As I stated earlier, if you would not have a smartboard, you could still go and access a computer lab or just a computer and bring it up on your screen and have the students gather around to listen. You can click on this hyperlink, same way as I mentioned before, by opening it or copy and paste into your browser. When the page loads, you should come to TeacherTube. There will be an ad. All you have to do is go up to the upper right-hand corner and X on it, and then, after clicking on the X, your video will load. It's important to know what your buttons represent. Down here is your play and pause. This is your volume. This helps you decide how far into the video you would like to go, or if you have to go back and review. And over here lets you maximize or make your video go to full screen. It's important that you have control, and you can X out on the ads at any time, that you have control over the play and pause, because throughout the video you're going to be stopping and asking the students whether your statements are reality or fantasy. It's important because this way you'll be able to have ongoing assessment, looking to see if the students understand what's reality versus fantasy, as well as keeping the students engaged with what's going on in the story. After the Little Red Riding Hood guided practice lesson piece, you're done with day 1. Next is on to day 2. Here, the students are going to have some independent practice with reality versus fantasy. When you begin, it's important to again review the lesson goals and the definitions of reality and fantasy. Also, recap what you did yesterday. Have some students give an example of reality and fantasy from Little Red Riding Hood. This way, you're drawing on their prior knowledge of the wolves, things that they found out what wolves really do, and then things that what they learned was fantasy with a story that was familiar, probably to most of your students. Then, the students are going to read the wolf story. The wolf story is from the Treasures book. If you do not have access to Treasures, this story can easily be found online through Amazon I found prices that were 65 cents for a paperback, to even borrowing it from the library. It's called Wolf and it's by Becky Bloom. To promote collaboration amongst students, the students will either be partner reading or they will have the ability to listen to the story on CD. That's where the listening library comes into effect. In my classroom, I would have them go over to the listening area and gather around the CD player. You could also put it on the computer if you have a computer in your classroom and gather students around the computer to listen. The idea is that they're following along in the text. I also state that I want the students to read the story twice. That's because a lot of times the first time you're just getting used to the story, getting over the words, especially if you're reading with a partner. You're trying to decode a lot of things. The second time around, you can pay attention to more of the finer details and what's going on in the illustrations and thinking about how this relates to reality and how this relates to fantasy instead of just thinking about what's going on in the story. The last part of the lesson is the assessment. As I stated earlier, the formative piece was with the dry erase boards during the Little Red Riding Hood activity. The summative piece that I have happens after the students read The Wolf Story by Becky Bloom. The students will have the option to write, draw, or complete a multiple picture choice to show 3 themes that are reality from the story and 3 themes that are fantasy from the story. Here are some examples of the summative. This is the writing piece, and this is the multiple choice picture. It's important to remember that your summative piece still matches the lesson goals. The students are still having to find 3 things that are fantasy from the story and 3 things that are reality. This may seem like the easier options, but there's some things in here that are trying to mislead the students because they really didn't happen in the story, whether they are fantasy or reality. Also, it's important that your summative assessment matches your standards. The students are still asking and answering questions about the text, reality and fantasy. Their answers are coming straight from the text, and they're using the illustrations and words in the story to help them make the decision. Well, thank you for listening, and I hope this provided a fun, easy way to go over my lesson plan and my reflection. Feel free to go ahead and review it as well. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.